Hello, it's John, and I'm back yet again. And I've had this project burning in the background for a while now, but I keep getting distracted with rebel uprisings and attempted coups. But I finally found some time to share this little project with you. You're about to witness my first ever N-scale DCC installation into a freight locomotive. This is an Atlas SD24. I realize Southern Pacific never had SD24s like this, but I like the way it looks, so I'm going to install a LokeSound Select Direct Micro DCC and Sound Decoder from ESU in it. In addition to this, I will also install a speaker so that it makes some noise. Like most N-scale diesels, you can disassemble this model by carefully pulling the shell off the mechanism. The decoder comes with LEDs and wires for the speaker. It's intended to replace the factory light board, and it's just the right size. I'd really like to squeeze the speaker near the end of the locomotive here, but I don't think there's going to be enough space for it once I get the decoder in. The decoder has these little electronic components that take up space, which will make fitting the speaker there even harder. So I think what I'm going to do instead is to cut out part of the weight that's hidden by the fuel tank cover on the bottom of the frame down here. So I've never taken one of these models completely apart, so to help me keep track of where stuff goes, I'm going to mark the frame in a way that I won't be able to mistakenly reassemble it the wrong way. If you've done this before, you're probably laughing at me for doing this. I'm sure once I've taken a few models apart, it'll become a lot easier. I'm just going to be cautious though, because it's better to look lame and do it right than to rush through and screw something up. I'm going to take the light shield off and set it in a container off to the side here so it doesn't get lost. And then I'm going to loosen the screws that hold the frame together. There's one at each end. I'm still paranoid about putting it back together wrong, so I'm going to make some additional marks to indicate the front end of the model here. I figure it's okay to do this because, you're never going to see this, right? Because it's going to have a shell on it. I have to pry the two halves of the frame apart using a small flathead screwdriver. And I know the trucks are supposed to fall out like that, so that's no big deal. The copper contact strips also come out. And then everything just comes apart like this. And you have to make sure you catch all the pieces, because some of these pieces are pretty critical. So the factory light board just comes out, and I'm going to take these little contact clips. They have these little extra copper pieces on the light board, and I'm going to save those just in case I can use them on my decoder later. And then the motor's mounted in a little plastic cradle, and the cradle is held into one of the frame halves. You need to unclick the little plastic tabs that keep it in place, and I'm thinking about marking the motor with my Sharpie, but it seems that the copper contacts that are attached to it have to face the top in order to work. So I don't think I need to mark anything. I just have to remember that, put the copper contacts toward the top. I measured and cut a small piece of styrene that I'll stick the speaker I want to use to, and I marked this area out of the fuel tank to be removed. I plan to remove a little bit of material at a time so I can test fit the speaker. I don't want to remove too much because then it'll take out too much weight and it's going to affect the pulling power of the engine if it's really light. I started off trying to remove the material from the fuel tank area with a file, but that was really slow. So instead I got a rotary tool and used a cutting blade to remove the material instead. That worked a lot better. A quick note of advice, always use eye protection when you're going to do any kind of cutting on a model like this, because those little metal pieces will blind you. So the first part of the reassembly process is to put the motor cradle back in the half of the frame where it came from, and then the copper contacts have to be lined up like I was saying before so that they come up where the decoder is going to be. And I'm learning as I put this thing back together that it's designed so that it can only go back together one way. And that's a huge help for someone like me who's never done this before. And I need to put the drive components in next. Okay, so the motor and the drive components are installed, And as I mentioned before, I'm using a Lokesound Select Direct Micro. It's part number 73100. These wires that it comes with are brown, and that's color-coded for a speaker according to the NMRA standards. So it comes with the speaker wires and LEDs, which is pretty cool. The decoder also comes with documentation that shows you the orientation that the decoder is supposed to be in when it's installed. It also shows you which contacts are for speakers and electrical pickup, etc. I'm sure I'll be referring back to these instructions frequently. The DCC decoder is the one on the bottom here, and the light board is on top. And we're looking at the bottom of the decoder and the top of the factory light board. One interesting difference I'm noticing is that the LEDs attach to the top of the factory light board, but they get soldered to the bottom of the decoder. And I'm going to try to make the LEDs tilt up like this so that the light gets emitted close to where the factory light board had it placed. I'm trying to make sure that the light gets emitted from around the same area as it was with the factory light board, because the lights did look pretty good on this model. I noticed on the factory light board that there's a little light shield around the LED, and I've cut a small piece of heat shrink tubing to try to duplicate that look on this LED that I'm going to put on there. This is the original here. You see how it has that? I figure if I try to duplicate what's on the factory light board, that should give me some pretty good results, because Atlas put it in this way for a reason, right? That's my thinking anyway. Okay, so I got the LEDs and speaker wires soldered to the board, and it's time to try to put this decoder into the frame. I may have tilted the LEDs a little bit too much, but they can move a little bit. Here's the original. You can see they're a little wonky, but hey, it's my first time, so cut me a piece, all right? So the decoder gets squeezed between the frame halves, just like the light board was, and the power is fed into the decoder through contacts that touch the frame halves in various places. The motor contacts that came up through the top of the motor cradle then contact some pads on the bottom of the decoder. It's important to note that the spacers that came off when the screws were taken out at the ends of the frame have to be put back in when you screw the frame back together. That's what prevents the frame halves from touching, and it's a good thing too, because if the frame halves touch, it creates a short that destroys your decoder. Alright, so I got the decoder placed and the frame screwed back together, so I figured this is a good time to check if it's working. The LEDs came on, so this is good. Model Train Kitty approves. I'm going to try this tiny 10mm speaker that I bought from someone on eBay. My P42 DC locomotives use speakers that are pretty close to this size, and they sound okay, just with a piece of styrene like this stuck to the speaker face. So I'm going to try a similar design for this model. I realized that I won't need those brown speaker wires after all, so I took them off, off the decoder, and I'm going to route the wires that are attached to this speaker up through the frame somehow. I'm still figuring out how I'm going to do this. So I'm going to use some CA glue to secure the styrene that has the speaker stuck to it now onto the frame, and then the fuel tank cover will fit over this with some room to spare. I'm starting to wonder if I maybe cut a little too much of the fuel tank weight out. Something else I'm kind of figuring on here is that I might be able to, or I might need to, construct an enclosure for this speaker. So I'm going to glue this down with some CA here and glue it to the metal, to the frame. This is what CA is for. It glues metal to plastic, or plastic to metal in this case. And it seems like the speaker wires can be routed through the crack between the frame halves and then up to the top where the decoder contacts are. I'm going to have to take this truck off to access this though, because the wires might get stuck in the truck somehow. Yeah, I think I want to tape these down. Okay, I took the truck off so I can access this part of the frame under it to tape the speaker wires in place. And I'm running one wire up each side, and I've taped it to the side of the frame as well. With it all taped down like this, it looks like it should be okay. I don't think it's going to escape. And then, like I said, I've run the wires up the side and I've taped those down to the side of the frame. And they're just long enough, too, to solder them to the board. And in case you're wondering, I taped them down so that they don't interfere with any moving parts, like this. Then put this truck back on and test this thing. Alright, so I've put the chassis on a short piece of test track, and this is attached to my Loc programmer. Well, it works, but it sounds terrible. Okay, well, at least it's making noise, right? I'm going to go on to ESU's website here and get the sound set from here. And I think I'll reload the sound while it's sitting on the track there. So, I'll save this. I'll load it up into the decoder and try again. Alright, I put the shell back on and hoping that maybe having the fuel tank over the speaker there might make it sound better, kind of acting as an enclosure or something. Oh, I don't know. I mean, it works and it makes noise, but it sounds pretty bad. This is the point in time when I have to make a decision. The sound the model is making is kind of similar to the P42s I did, the ones that I mentioned earlier. I know Loc Sound decoders should sound a lot better than this, though. Well, I think I'll take it to the layout and run it around a bit. Maybe I'm being too picky, right? That'll give me a chance to really think about what I want to do here. Okay, so I'm here at the South Bay Historical Railroad Society's N-scale layout in Santa Clara, and I've borrowed a short string of empty coal hoppers and a caboose so that it looks okay. Let's take this thing out and around the layout. Looks pretty good pulling these hoppers, doesn't it? Did a layout tour of this layout back in 2016. Well, it's almost not bad when it's just the horn going, but then the bell and everything else, it just sounds distorted or something. Wouldn't that look cool with about 20 more cars behind it, sneaking around this little curve here? So, I don't know. I mean, it looks good running down the track, and it runs, and it's nice to have some sound, but man, this sound is pretty bad. I know I've talked about things being good enough in the past with some of my other installations, but I have to say that this one is definitely not good enough. I mean, the model looks great, but it just sounds terrible. So I think I'm going to fix this next time. And yeah, I think I will. So join me next time on the next episode of John's Models, and I'm going to troubleshoot this and try to correct this sound problem, because one, it looks better than that, and two, I know that Loc Sound decoders sound better than this. There's obviously something wrong with what I did here. So in the end, it worked, and I got it to run and everything and make noise, but I don't know. Usually I end these videos with, if I can do it, you can too. But I don't think I want you to do one that sounds like this, so we'll save that for next time. I'll catch you then.